My name is Irene O'Brien. I'm 33, and this was the first Christmas I didn't go inside. I was idling at the curb in front of my parents' two-bedroom house in Missouri, heat on low so the windshield wouldn't fog, trunk packed to the hinges like I was moving in instead of visiting, wool socks in everyone's sizes, a mini projector for movie nights, spices for peppermint cake in a tin that used to hold sewing needles, even a thin box with a delicate gold necklace I'd picked for Mom after 3 laps around an antique store. The porch light burned the same amber it always had, tired and uneven, the kind of light that pretends to be warm. Snow came soft, then thicker, layering the steps as if the world wanted to tuck this house in and put it to sleep. That's when my phone buzzed. No hello. No where are you? No heart emoji. Just one sentence, precise and mean as a needle. Stay away from Christmas, you worthless disappointment. When the text arrived, the car made a sound I recognized, something between a sigh and a protest, as if even the engine understood this was the kind of sentence that could break a life in half. I stared at the glowing words until the light from the screen seemed to stain my gloves. The clock read December 20th, 9:47 p.m. The neighborhood was already quiet enough to hear cutlery clink behind curtains, a TV laugh track from somewhere down the block, a dog's collar shake once and go still again. I waited for anger. It didn't come. Grief tried the door. That didn't open either. What filled me instead was a feeling with no temperature, like stepping into a room where the furnace has been off for years, and not realizing it until you stop moving. Snow gathered on the porch rail like frosting, gentle, insistent, covering what it could. I watched it climb the steps and thought, the world cleans things without asking permission. I lowered my phone into my lap. I did not text back. I did not knock. You should understand something before I put the car in reverse. My parents haven't worked in a long time. Dad used to clock in at the plant, stopped years ago for reasons that had a lot to do with pride and a little to do with laziness. Mom quit right before the pandemic, swore she'd find something worth her time, then never did. A vacuum formed, and I stepped into it like it was a family tradition. I paid the electric, the internet, the groceries, the car insurance, little bright lines on my budgeting spreadsheet that looked like care when you didn't stare too long. Sometimes I'd pretend I was paying for stability, not silence. Sometimes I was sure I couldn't tell the difference. It wasn't guilt, not exactly. It was more like a job description I was born into. You bring home good grades, you get to eat dinner without a fight. You win a scholarship, they brag in group chats they never add you to. You get promoted, they send a list of things the house needs. When I bought my first place in Austin, Mom's face cracked into tears. Not pride, but wounded ownership. So far, she said, as if distance were betrayal. So different, she added, and I understood that different had always been the crime. The only reason I kept showing up was Kayla, my sister. 28. Studying to be a physical therapist, dry humor that sneaks up on you and lives in your pocket the rest of the day. If she was the golden child, she never used the shine to blind me. She saw what I saw. She just learned to duck faster. I covered textbooks when she couldn't. Co-signed her first lease because I could. She never asked. She always thanked me. This trip, these gifts, were for her. I had planned the surprise with a ridiculous high school level giddiness that embarrassed me even while I felt it. I'd imagined walking in with the projector, cueing an old movie, Mom complaining about crumbs on the couch while secretly enjoying the noise, Dad pretending he didn't care, and then laughing at the same beat he always did. Delusion is a kind of kindness. It was the only kind I still knew how to afford. The text sat on my screen like a verdict. I pictured Mom's thumbs, brisk, satisfied, firing off that sentence without punctuation because cruelty doesn't need grammar. I waited for the second message, the explanation, the correction, the wrong person, sorry, but the only thing that came was more snow. I put the car in reverse. The backup camera painted the street in blue lines. One house over, someone had wrapped their mailbox in red ribbon. It looked strangled. I eased out of the driveway as carefully as I'd eased into this role for years, only this time I didn't try to make it look graceful. My tire tracks laid down 2 blunt truths in fresh white. I came, I left. 4 hours later, the state line passed like a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I pulled into a motel with an open sign that blinked like it had a stutter and bought a gas station sandwich that tasted like the color gray. In the car, with the heat too high and my sweater too festive, green with tiny embroidered lights Kayla dared me to wear, I took a bite and thought, I look like someone who still believes. The mirror disagreed. In case you're judging me for not fighting, for not storming the porch with my generous trunk and making them look at what they were throwing away, I'll say this. Sometimes silence is not surrender. Sometimes it's a scalpel. I put my phone face down on the passenger seat and noticed the small smear of frosting I'd gotten on the ribbon of Mom's necklace box. I wiped it with my sleeve until the stain disappeared. Some messes, apparently, still obeyed me. I didn't sleep much. When I did, it sounded like boots crunching salt. Morning was a cold coin flipped in an empty room. I checked out, then sat in the parking lot long enough to watch the manager smoke his second cigarette. A sparrow hopped under the vending machine, decided against whatever it found there, and left. On the drive to a quieter town with a cheaper rate, I made the calls. Bank, utilities, car insurance, internet, my voice steady, giving each rep the same line I'd rehearsed in my head. I need to remove my name, I said. I need to stop the autopay, I said. The joint emergency card? Freeze it. The word freeze felt correct. It had weight. It implied motion could happen again, but only if I chose it. No one asked why. No one told me I was cruel. The world, I discovered, is indifferent to the roles we invent. At 12:07 p.m. on Christmas Day, Kayla texted, "Where are you?" Mom canceled everything. No food, no lights. Says you think you're too good for us. I stared at the screen, saw her little typing bubble begin and stop 3 separate times. "This place is so cold," she added. And then, literally and emotionally, LOL. She always uses humor like a doorstop, keeps the room from slamming shut. Something came up, I wrote. I'm okay. I erased the next sentence 3 times before leaving it blank. I didn't tell her about the trunk, or the necklace, or how long I sat outside swallowing the idea that maybe I'd misread the text, maybe it was a joke, maybe it was wine talking, maybe it was a test. I'd studied for tests my whole life. I was done taking them. At 5:42 p.m., the electric company emailed, "Payment failed. Account overdue." At 7:13, the car insurance, lapse due to non-payment. At 9:47, because life loves symmetry, a message from Mom, "Please fix this." I read it once, twice. There was no apology attached. No, we should talk. No, I spoke in anger. Just a command written like a grocery list. I set my phone on the nightstand of the motel, the kind of veneer that shows every ring from every stranger's water glass, and turned it off. The room's heater clicked on with a rush that sounded like weather. I lay back on a bedspread patterned with an old argument and stared at the ceiling until the smoke detector's tiny red light began to feel like a metronome for a future I could learn to keep time to. I wasn't angry, not yet. Anger is hot and bright and alive. What I felt was colder and more surgical, the opposite of noise. In the morning, I walked the downtown strip. 3 shops, a cafe that smelled like burnt sugar, a thrift store displaying a snow globe with a stuck blizzard. A kid walked with his father past me, paper crowns from a cracker tilted on their heads, laughing about nothing. Joy always sounds like it doesn't have to explain itself. I held a to-go cup between my gloves and let the heat stripe my palms. On the cafe's TV, a muted weather map spun neon systems across states I wouldn't be driving through. Above the door, a bell chimed. A tired little chime every time someone left. I watched couples leave with their pastries and thought, no one here is cutting off their parents today. Or maybe they are, and you just can't see it. By the time I stepped back into the motel room, a decision had already finished happening inside me. I didn't articulate it. I didn't write it in a notes app. But it was there, complete and calm, like a page slid under a door. I was not going back to Missouri, not to that house, not to the version of me that corrected their balances by midnight and called it love. I picked up my phone, turned it over in my hand. The screen stayed black, obedient. I laid it back down. They didn't know it yet. Sitting in that house with the porch slowly drowning under clean white, composing new stories where I was the villain and they were the storm's victims. But something had shifted that you can't unshift. The way a bone sets itself new after a break, not weaker, just different. I had been the backup generator, keeping their story running. I had powered 1,000 small lies with my yes. I had confused endurance for devotion. And somewhere between the text and the motel, the generator went quiet. They had no idea what was coming next. When people talk about freedom, they imagine fireworks, champagne, a clean slate. Mine came in the shape of a phone I refused to turn on. It sat on the nightstand like a patient animal, waiting to be fed. I didn't touch it. Not that day, not the next. I let the silence stretch until it began to hum. By morning, I'd moved to a smaller motel outside Columbia. $42 a night, stale coffee smell, but with a window that looked out at a frozen pond. I spent that morning making lists, not of goals or resolutions, but of endings. Cancel mom and dad's internet. Remove my name from all utility accounts. Close the joint credit line. Stop being the emergency fund. Each checkmark felt like a small funeral. Not for them, but for the version of me who thought helping was the same thing as being loved. The clerk at the gas station across the street started recognizing me. She had nails painted silver and a voice that made every word sound like a confession. One night she asked, "You visiting family?" I laughed, a brittle sound. "Something like that," I said, and she didn't ask again. Around the third day, I finally turned my phone back on. The screen exploded, missed calls, texts, voice messages. Mom had a pattern. Guilt, rage, guilt again. "You need to grow up. After everything we've done for you, don't expect family when you're old and alone." Same vocabulary, different order, always predictable. I scrolled without opening, then pressed mark all as read. There was one message that didn't fit the rhythm, from Kayla. "Hey, you okay? Mom's acting weird. No decorations, no food. She said Christmas is canceled since you think you're too good for us. What's going on?" I stared at her words longer than I should have. The honesty in them hurt more than the insults ever could. She didn't deserve to be caught in the fallout. But I wasn't ready to tell her the truth yet. "Something came up," I texted back. "I'll explain later." Her reply came fast. "Okay, just wanted you to know. The house feels cold. Literally and emotionally LOL." That tiny LOL cracked me open. I could picture her sitting on the sofa under a too-thin blanket, trying to make light of the dark. That night I got another text from Mom, 3 words, clipped and commanding. "Please fix this." No apology, no acknowledgement. Just a demand, as if I was still the family mechanic who could turn guilt into money. I didn't respond. I just whispered into the motel air, "Not this time." The next few days passed in a rhythm that felt strange but clean. Mornings I walked the empty streets, wrapped in my green sweater, scarf pulled up to my ears. Afternoons, I sat in cafes, watching people live without me. Parents guiding toddlers in puffy coats, couples arguing over lattes, someone dropping a mitten and a stranger picking it up. All these tiny kindnesses, free and uncounted, made me realize how expensive love had become in my family. When I'd paid their zills, I was keeping the illusion alive. My money was the glue that held their dysfunction together. Without it, cracks began to show. By December 27th, I got an email from the power company, service suspended for non-payment. Then another from their car insurance, policy canceled. I didn't have to lift a finger. I just stopped holding everything up, and the whole structure started to sink. It should have felt cruel. Instead, it felt honest. I started sleeping through the night again, though I still woke up sometimes at 3 a.m. out of habit, thinking maybe there was a new emergency to solve. Then I'd remember. I'd quit the job of being their savior. On New Year's Eve, while the world counted down and strangers kissed at midnight, I sat in my motel room with a bottle of cider and a notebook. Not resolutions, reflections. I wrote, "Every time I helped them, I thought I was saving the family. I was just delaying its collapse." The fireworks outside were faint, distant, like ghosts of celebrations I no longer attended. I didn't call anyone at midnight. No one called me either. That silence used to mean rejection. Now it sounded like peace. A few days into January, my phone lit up again. "Dad," a voicemail. His tone was calm, but calculated. He'd always been good at that kind of performance. "Irene, I think things have gone too far. Maybe we should have a family talk. The house might be at risk. We need your help to get back on track." It was never about reconciliation. It was about maintenance, keeping the lights on, literally and metaphorically. I didn't return the call. Instead, I called Kayla. She picked up on the second ring, her voice soft, tired. "Hey, sis." We talked for 2 hours. About the silence, about Mom's outbursts, about Dad sitting in the dark, like a ghost of his own pride. I told her everything. the text, the trunk full of gifts, the drive, the motel. For a long time, she didn't say anything. Then she whispered, "I believe you." 3 words, simple, unadorned, but they landed like sunlight through a boarded-up window. For once, someone in that family saw me. After that night, I stopped hiding. When relatives texted asking what happened, I told them. Not defensively, not with bitterness, just the truth. Mom told me to stay away from Christmas, so I did. Simple facts, no embellishment, no apologies. Uncle Martin called once, trying to smooth things over. "You know how your mother gets," he said. "Family's family." "Exactly," I said. "And that's why it matters who you let define it." He went quiet. People usually do when the script changes. By mid-January, Kayla called again. "They're fighting every day," she said. "The heat's barely working. Mom keeps blaming you. Dad keeps blaming her." I asked how she was holding up. "Fine," she said, then paused. "No, not fine, just awake, finally." That made me smile. It's a strange thing, realizing you've been asleep for half your life. Before we hung up, she said softly, "Mom's scared, you know." "Of what?" "That you're not bluffing this time." I didn't answer, because she was right. That night, I called Aunt Lee, Mom's older sister, the quiet one who never joined the gossip chain. She picked up on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. I told her everything, every word, every receipt. When I finished, she sighed. It's about time someone stood up to them. Her voice was calm, but weighted with history. Then she said something that made my stomach twist. "Irene, your parents have been lying about you for years, telling everyone you cut them off out of greed, that you've gone cold. When I asked for proof, your mother said you were unstable." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. There it was, the missing piece that made every awkward family reunion make sense. The stares, the whispering, the way everyone spoke to me like I was a ticking bomb. "I'm sorry," Aunt Lee said softly. "You didn't deserve that." I pressed my hand against my eyes and laughed once, sharp and bitter. "No," I said, "but it explains everything." She hesitated before adding, "You're not alone in this anymore." That was the first real thing anyone had said to me in months. When I hung up, I looked out the window. Snow was falling again, thick and quiet. The pond was frozen solid, reflecting the motel's neon sign, open, over and over like a promise. Maybe freedom didn't look like fireworks. Maybe it looked like this. A room that was fully paid for, a phone that stayed silent, and a heart that finally stopped apologizing for beating on its own. The silence held for a week. Then the stories started. At first, they came in whispers. A cousin's text, a screenshot from Aunt Lee, a relative tagging me in a family prayer circle post on Facebook that read, "Sometimes we must forgive the ones who abandon us." I didn't need a name to know who wrote it. It was Mom's favorite narrative. She was the victim. I was the storm. I didn't respond. But every new message added another pin to the invisible map of their collapse. Aunt Lee called one evening, voice steady but edged with disbelief. "Your mom told everyone you got emotional, stormed out during a visit, and decided to punish them by cutting off support." I almost laughed. "Impressive," I said. "She even made me sound dramatic." "Don't worry," Aunt Lee added. "No one's buying it. People know what's real now." Still, the damage was done. My parents had been feeding that story for years. Whenever someone asked why they were struggling, my name was their alibi. But the truth had legs this time. Aunt Lee started sharing receipts, screenshots, payment records, proof. She wasn't just listening anymore, she was acting. And in that moment, I realized something chilling. My silence had always been their weapon, but now it was their undoing. Meanwhile, Kayla was unraveling her own piece of the web. She'd been staying with them between finals, trying to keep peace the way I used to. But peace isn't possible in a house built on blame. "Mom's losing it," she whispered during one late-night call. "She keeps asking where you are, then says you're dead to her, then asks if I've texted you. It's like she's fighting with herself." "What about Dad?" "He just sits in the dark, says you'll come to your senses, says you always do." I let out a quiet breath. Not this time. Kayla hesitated. "You know what's weird? He acts like you disappearing was part of some plan he already made, like he's waiting for a payoff." A chill went down my spine. "What do you mean, payoff?" "I don't know," she said softly. "But I found a stack of unopened bills in the kitchen drawer. Some are months old. He's been hiding them." That was Dad's way. He believed pride could pay the rent. I wanted to tell her to leave, to get out before their desperation turned cruel, but she was stubborn. "I'll stay until the semester ends," she said. "Then I'm done. I can't keep pretending this is normal." Days passed. The calls from Mom shifted tone, from fury to desperation. "The house is falling apart. Your father won't talk to me. Are you happy now? Each voicemail was a performance for an audience of one. I never pressed play past the first 5 seconds. Because what was there left to say? They'd built their house out of borrowed money and emotional blackmail. I'd just stopped being the foundation. And when the foundation walks away, the house doesn't stand long. By late January, I was back in Austin. My apartment felt strange. Quiet, clean, no family echo bouncing off the walls. The fridge had real food instead of takeout containers. My plants were alive. I'd even started running again, something I hadn't done since college. The first morning back, sunlight cut through the blinds like an apology from the universe. I stood in the kitchen with a mug of coffee and realized I didn't owe anyone an explanation for being at peace. That's when the phone rang. Kayla. Her voice was low, almost trembling. They're asking me for money now. I closed my eyes. How much? Small stuff, she said. Groceries, gas. But when I said no, Mom said I'm turning into you. That word, you, sounded like a diagnosis in her mouth. What did you do? I asked. Hung up, she said. Then, after a beat, and cried, but only for a minute. I smiled. You're learning. She laughed weakly. Guess it runs in the family, huh? The part where we finally stopped paying for love. That line stayed with me long after the call ended. A week later, Aunt Lee called again. I confronted your father, she said flatly. He didn't deny a thing. Said you were ungrateful. Said he and your mother deserved comfort after everything they sacrificed. What did they sacrifice? I asked. She sighed. Nothing, except you. I sat in silence. Outside, the Texas sun looked merciless. Aunt Lee continued, her voice growing sharper. They used your generosity to maintain their image. Told everyone they were fine because their successful daughter helped out. Now that you stopped, the truth's leaking out. Fast. I leaned back against the wall, staring at the ceiling fan spinning like a slow clock. So what happens now? Now? Aunt Lee said. Now they face themselves. For the first time, I stopped feeling like a villain. I wasn't the cruel daughter who abandoned them. I was the witness who stopped lying. And yet, part of me still ached for what could have been. For the mother who could have said, I'm proud of you. For the father who could have said, I was wrong. But ghosts can't apologize. They only haunt the places you once loved. A few days later, Kayla sent a text. The pipes froze. The car's gone. Mom's blaming Dad. Dad's blaming you. I'm packing. I typed back, good. Come here if you need to. My door's open. She replied, thanks, but I need to stand on my own first. That was when I knew she'd be okay. It's strange. When you stop holding up the people who broke you, you expect guilt. But what comes instead is clarity. I started seeing the pattern everywhere. The way Mom's voice still echoed in mine when I second-guessed myself. The way Dad's silence trained me to explain too much. The way I kept apologizing for taking up space. Every small freedom felt like rebellion. Buying something for myself without guilt. Cooking dinner and eating it while it was still warm. Sleeping without checking my phone. One night, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights blink like distant constellations. Somewhere below, music from a bar drifted up, muffled but alive. I thought about how many years I'd lived waiting for permission to rest. Then I said it out loud. 3 words, quiet but final. I'm not sorry. Because I wasn't. Not anymore. It started with a knock on my door. Not a polite one, a desperate one, the kind that doesn't wait between hits. When I opened it, Aunt Lee stood there, wrapped in her heavy gray coat, hair dusted with winter. She'd driven all night from Missouri. Irene, she said, her breath visible in the morning chill. I found something. Inside, she laid out a stack of papers on my kitchen table, bank statements, check duplicates, and a few scribbled notes that looked like they'd been torn from a spiral pad. My stomach sank before she even spoke. Your father's been siphoning money, she said quietly, from your mother, from accounts she didn't even know existed. He's been covering late fees with whatever cash he could find, including yours. I sank into a chair. The words felt like cold water. He used my transfers? Lee nodded. Every time you sent money, he'd reroute it. Told your mother he was paying the bills, but he wasn't. I pressed my hands against my forehead. How long? Years. The anger came in slow waves, like thawing ice breaking free down a river. All this time, I'd been patching holes in a boat that someone else kept drilling. Your mom never saw the accounts? I asked. She didn't want to, Aunt Lee said. She preferred the version where your father was handling things. That way, she could keep blaming you. I thought of all the times Mom said, we're struggling because you don't help enough. And now I saw it clearly. It was never about help. It was about control. Aunt Lee's voice softened. He's good at lying, Irene. Always has been. I stared at the paperwork spread across my table. Numbers, signatures, dates, each one a tiny betrayal dressed up as responsibility. He forged her name, I asked. Sometimes. Sometimes he just lied straight to her face. The kettle whistled, piercing the silence. I poured us tea just to have something to hold. So what happens now? I asked. Aunt Lee looked tired. He'll keep spinning stories, but people are starting to see through them. And now, with proof, you can stop hiding. I laughed bitterly. Hiding? I thought I'd already burned the bridge. She gave a sad smile. You lit a match, Irene. He's the one who soaked it in gasoline. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, city lights glowing like small promises that life could still be good. Every sound outside, the hum of traffic, a siren somewhere distant, felt like proof I wasn't trapped anymore. But the revelations wouldn't stop replaying. My father's pride, my mother's complicity, the years of silence that cost me a childhood. I used to think cutting them off was punishment. Now I saw it was survival. 2 days later, Kayla called, crying. He asked me for money again, she said. For groceries, but I found a casino receipt in his coat pocket. My heart clenched. Kayla, you need to leave. I did, she said between shaky breaths. I packed a bag. Mom screamed, said I was abandoning her too. What did Dad do? Nothing. He just sat there, watching. That image hit harder than the words. The quiet observer, orchestrating chaos by refusing to stop it. I told her to come stay with me, at least until she finished school. She hesitated. I don't want to be a burden, she said. You're not, I replied. You never were. There was a pause. Then she whispered, You sound like you mean that now. I do. Later that week, Aunt Lee called again. I talked to your father, she said. He's furious. Says you turned your sister against him. He claims you're poisoning the family. I sighed. They said the same thing when I got my scholarship. Apparently, I've been poisoning them since 2009. Lee chuckled under her breath. Good. Let them choke on the truth. But the real shock came a few nights later when Dad left me a voicemail, his voice calm, deliberate, almost rehearsed. Irene, we need to stop all this nonsense. Your mother isn't well. You've made your point, but she needs you. We all do. It was the same pattern as always. His calmness masking manipulation, guilt folded neatly between every syllable. I didn't call back, but I saved the message. Something about it felt off, too measured, too precise. And in the background, just before the line clicked off, I could hear it. Mom's voice, faint, muffled, saying something I couldn't make out. I replayed it 5 times. On the 5th, I caught it. I didn't write it. I froze. Didn't write what? It didn't make sense. Not yet. But something inside me tightened, a premonition that this wasn't the last lie I'd uncover. The next morning, I got a plain white envelope in the mail. No return address. Missouri postmark. Inside, a handwritten letter in shaky script. I'm sorry for everything, Irene. I said things I didn't mean. Please come home. Let's start over. Mom. The paper smelled faintly of his cologne. That was when I knew. My father had written it. And it wasn't a confession. It was bait. I sat on the couch staring at the letter, the city muted outside. I wanted to scream, but the sound wouldn't come. After a long while, I picked up my phone and called Kayla. She answered on the second ring. Dad forged Mom's apology, I said quietly. She didn't sound surprised. I figured he's been desperate lately. Desperate for what? To feel like he still controls you. I laughed bitterly. Then he should have picked someone else. I think he already did, she said. Mom. That silence between us said everything. By the time I hung up, one truth had crystallized in my chest. He wasn't trying to win me back. He was trying to prove he still could. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Then I set it on the counter, poured myself a glass of water, and whispered to no one, This ends with me. And I meant it. 2 days later, another envelope appeared. Same shaky handwriting, same Missouri postmark. But this one was shorter, colder. Your mother is not well. You've made your point. I can't do this without you. Dad. No greeting, no closure. Just accusation disguised as obligation. For a moment, I considered tearing it in half. Instead, I laid it on the table beside the first one. The 2 letters looked like a pair of ghosts arguing in silence. My mind kept circling back to the voicemail, the muffled voice, the words, I didn't write it. I knew what I had to do. That night, I packed a small bag, filled the tank, and started driving north. 12 hours of interstate and bad coffee later, Missouri welcomed me back with the same gray sky I'd left behind. By the time I pulled into the neighborhood, it was dusk. The snow had melted into patches of dirty ice, and the house looked smaller. The curtains were drawn, the porch light dead. When Mom opened the door, she looked thinner, older, like someone who'd been living under fluorescent light too long. She blinked, confused, as if she didn't quite believe I was real. "Irene?" Her voice was a dry whisper. I nodded. "Got your letters." She frowned. "Letters?" "Yeah, the ones you sent." She shook her head slowly, bewildered. I didn't send anything. And that was it. The confirmation I already knew was coming, but still hoped wouldn't. Dad's footsteps echoed from the hallway. He froze when he saw me. "Irene," he said, trying for calm, but his voice cracked on the second syllable. "You shouldn't have come here." "Apparently I did," I said, holding up the envelopes. "You wrote these, didn't you?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes darted toward Mom, then back to me. "She's been sick," he said finally. "You wouldn't understand." "Then why fake her apology?" I was trying to fix things. "By lying again?" His jaw clenched. "You've always been dramatic." Behind him, Mom flinched like the word hit her too. The air in that house was heavy, thicker than memory, full of things unspoken. I could smell the stale heat from the space heater in the corner, the faint sourness of old coffee. I stepped past him into the living room. Everything looked the same, except smaller. The couch sagged in the middle. The picture frames on the wall leaned slightly, as if tired of pretending to hold something together. Mom sank into her chair, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. She didn't look angry anymore, just lost. "Irene," she said weakly, "your father told me you cut us off for attention, that you—" I cut her off. "Mom, please stop." She fell silent. I took a slow breath. "He's been using your name, your voice, to keep me on a leash, and you let him." Her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know." "That's the problem," I said quietly. "You never wanted to know." Dad slammed his palm against the table. "Enough. You think you're better than us now, with your job and your fancy car?" I turned to him, steady. "No, Dad. I just stopped letting you steal from me." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You've always had a flair for the dramatic." The words felt like an echo of every argument we'd ever had. I realized then that I'd never get what I came for. Not truth, not closure, not apology. "I didn't come to fight," I said. "I came to say goodbye." I turned toward the door. Mom's voice broke behind me. "Please don't go. Not like this." I stopped. For a second, I saw her. Not the manipulator, not the enabler, just a woman who'd spent too long believing her husband's lies. "I wish things were different," I said. "But love that hurts this much isn't love." Then I left. I drove until the house disappeared in the rearview mirror. The road was empty, the sky pale and colorless. I kept waiting for the sadness to hit, but it didn't. What came instead was something quieter, a strange, weightless calm. Halfway through the drive, my phone rang. "Kayla." "Did you go?" she asked. "I did." "How bad?" "Worse than I thought." She sighed. Aunt Lee stopped by earlier. She found more papers, bank transfers, forged checks. Dad's been taking money out of Mom's account for years. I tightened my grip on the wheel. "Does Mom know?" "She does now. Aunt Lee showed her everything." "And?" "She cried," Kayla said softly. Real tears this time. When I pulled into a rest stop outside St. Louis, the air was biting cold. I sat there for a long time, listening to trucks pass in the distance, watching the steam from my breath fade against the windshield. The world felt bigger again. I called Aunt Lee. She answered immediately. "I was hoping you'd call." "You were right," I said. "He forged the letters." "I know," she said, "and he's gone." "Gone?" "Left the house this morning after I confronted him. Your mom's been calling around, but no one's seen him. She's scared now, Irene, not angry. Scared." I didn't know how to respond. I just stared at the highway stretching endlessly ahead. "She wants to talk to you," Aunt Lee added. "No," I said softly. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." That night, I checked into another motel, a quiet one off the interstate, neon sign flickering like a pulse. I set the letters on the nightstand, side by side, and stared at them under the yellow light. 2 lies pretending to be love. I took a lighter from my bag, the same one I used for candles back home, and watched the first page catch flame. The paper curled, edges turning black, the ink bleeding into smoke. When it was done, only ash remained, small, gray, harmless. For the first time in years, I slept without dreams.